Announcements. Hi, welcome to the January 28th edition of the Stabilization Brigade meeting. This meeting is recorded and hopefully will be posted on YouTube and other places. So please be aware of that as we go through the meeting, and if you share or speak about something, the topic. We do use the chat group for meeting minutes and attendance, so please register your attendance with the @ here in the chat, and your attendance will be noted in the notes. If you have an issue that you'd like to put in the notes, all you have to do is do an @item and then the text you'd like in the minutes, and it'll be automatically included in the notes. We've got, I think, what did I say, 4 things on the agenda today. We'll go over. If anybody has anything else after that, we'll take that on. The quick review for unit test coverage is basically nothing's really changed in the unit test coverage. I did add a new repository to the report here. We now have the OF Agent Go, which is the Go implementation of the OF Agent. It has no test as of yet, but that's there if people want to work with it and play with it and add tests to it. Any questions on the test coverage at this point? Okay.
David, is this only Go testing that you're getting coverage for? Because I'm pretty sure that Pi, Volta, and the OpenONU would have to have some tests.
I use make test when I initiate the test. It's possible my script is in error, but I'll go double check that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And last time action David to check PyTests. All right, moving on. Jira and patch update. There are 64 issues being worked or need to be worked, with 2 of those being blockers. Those 2 blockers are owned, so they are being worked. Since last meeting, which was on the 14th, we've had essentially 16 issues resolved, 11 created for a net downward trend of -5. We've been fairly stable over the last month or so. We actually closed this where a lot of the close if we to that point where the patch said I can't fix all the so please I put it this way, every week I plead, please let's get this reviewed and get this down. It's not happening. So I am open to ideas on what we need to do to get this down.
Is the problem is this a technical problem or a people problem? Is it that we don't have the review process, people aren't feeling confident in these patch sets, or enough to review them and have them merge, or is this the tests aren't good enough that we can feel that confidence?
You mean like the sanity tests and regression tests?
Yeah. I guess I'm trying to figure out if we're accumulating these, what's the blocker? Is it just people are not paying attention to the tests and they're coming up and then nobody pays attention to them and they sit around and people wait for them to merge? Is it people needing to ask for merges? Is it? I'm trying to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah. my opinion is that patch sets get created. It is a rather long cycle for them to get their first review, and that cycle gets longer. People then the patch set gets to a point where it needs rebased, and sometimes it does get rebased, sometimes it doesn't. So my opinion is that after people are submitting patch sets, they're not shepherding them through to the next level, through the review and merge process. People aren't pinging others saying, "Hey, could you review this?" Following up every day to make sure if the patch set needs rebased, that it's rebased. Following up every day with their patch set to see if it's got a review. If it's got a review, reply to those comments, and push back to get to the next level. So it feels that it's more people are firing and forgetting as opposed to following up. And that's not everybody, of course. But that's my opinion, I guess. That makes sense. And that's why I say my recommendation has been, if you submit a patch set, just dog that patch set like nothing until you get reviews, right? Ping myself, ping here, I'm gonna throw you under the bus, Scott. Ping Scott, right? Just ping on the chat list until people do the work and get the review and move forward. And if someone had comments on your review, make the changes and then dog them again until they get the next thing done. So I don't think it's an issue of the test. People are saying I don't trust sanity tests. It's people allocating the time to go through the code and actually do a review, and then shepherding their patch sets through.
There's a number of them that seem like they churn a lot back and forth in review as well. We can't account for, quality on an initial commit. So if we go back and forth, a dozen or more times over the course of a month, at what point is it just going to keep going? There's a number of them that have been open for quite a while in that case. And, whether or not it's being too picky or maybe we just don't want the feature, right? Is there at some point a go, no go where we're just like, you know what, forget the whole thing?
No, I haven't gone past the headline layer either.
If it gets to that, then those patch sets need to be brought to the attention of this meeting, and then we can actually talk about it. So, or at least brought up and made people aware of them. So if you run across a patch set like that, post it to the Slack channel, right? That this needs to be discussed, and if we handle it, in line on the Slack channel, whether we go forward or not with this patch set, great. If not, we'll bring it to the meeting. I don't want to say, wait to every Tuesday to have the meeting before those are discussed. It's just too long a wait, right? Bring it up on a Slack channel.
From my view, from what I look at in VoltaGo, in that report, I see that lately, I'll say like maybe over the past month or so, the changes that have gone in are changes that really touches a lot of files. Whether those has been checking for errors, putting in context, and doing linked changes. So those have touches a lot of file, and recently we have moved to version 3 of the VoltaLib. So pretty much anybody who had any commit during that time, they had to do a lot of churn because just the volume of code that have changes. If I just look on VoltaGo currently, I see a lot of them that have a merge conflict. And many of those merge conflict is not that you can't just do a simple rebase. They need to really do a manual rebase on that. So I think that's also contributing to the fact that things are slow. And I see a lot of Jenkins failures, -1 all over the place. So the churn itself, I think it's just making the entire process slow. And also, we don't have I don't think our sanity suite or even our hardware test is to a level where we can say that when we put a commit in, that has a lot of changes in it, that it will pass all the tests. And recently, like one of the issue that you raised, David, on Friday about the panic in the core, that was due to one of those big changes that was done lately to look at errors, and it introduced a bug on the restart. So those kind of things, it's like if we had a suite of tests that covers like restarting scenarios, we'll have catched that as well. So we are not there yet.
But I mean, all of this could just be a reflection of the enforcement of quality, right? You know, if the strictness of the review process goes up, then thusly the number of patches waiting for review go up. So this, I mean, one may follow the other.
Yeah, I agree.
Just jump on some notes. If the quality of the, so I get the point about the churn, and there are lots of patches that need manual rebasing right now. And so if you own one of those patches, I would say it's a higher priority to manually rebase an existing patch as opposed to submit new code under a new patch. Presumably, the patch set already submitted was a higher priority to do than what you're working on currently, so let's get that done. The QA team I know has been working on various restart cases for some of the robot tests, but they have these tests, but they don't necessarily run as part of the sanity test. I think that's right. Is that correct, Zach?
Yeah, that's right. We
Okay.
have a lot more tests than we're running on each, than the sanity tests we're running on each patch set. And I guess the question is how to balance comprehensiveness of testing before things get merged versus slowing down the developer pipeline too much by having a test job that runs for an hour before it'll let you, merge your code.
I'm trying to remember the age of some of these patch sets. It may not be slowing it down. Right, if a patch set's not merged for 14 days, an hour of testing isn't going to be the blocker there. Well, developers can always run these robot tests themselves. And
right.
do the more extensive testing.
Yeah, that's correct. And just recently, we worked out some problems with running all of the tests with BBSim. So it should be the case that a developer can run all of the tests on the code in a virtual environment now and figure out, hopefully get some insight in that way into whether things are really working.
Do we know how long it would take to run the whole test suite on BBSim?
There is a job that runs periodically that's running the functional tests on BBSim. I'd have to check to see how long that takes, but I'm guessing it's like, less than an hour.
Okay. So to Zach, your original question, I think it's more of to be honest, a people issue than a tactical issue at this point. With the caveat of a lot of churn recently.
To that end, just an observation as well. Since 2.2 was released and since the beginning of the year, the floodgates for new features have opened up. Some folks may have been holding off for that. So I know a lot of the multicast work is starting to go in, multi-TCONT, purport management, MIB templating, And then some of the new bow work as well is starting to come in mass. And, again, that has an effect on that list too.
It does, but I don't know how we're going to get this under control unless we get that list down. It's not going to get better if we don't do something.
No, I agree. I just usually, it's the pattern of some of the newer features plus the stability enforcement equals 52 patches waiting for merge.
Yeah.
Do we know of those 52 how many are in need of a rebase?
I don't.
Okay, because that would be that seems like that's the first prerequisite is getting it so that these could actually technically be merged. A lot of them are not in that state right now, and if we have we only have a working set of maybe 5 or 10 that could be. That would be
Yeah, the problem is the minute you merge one, the other 51 need rebased.
right. But that might be an automatic process, not the manual process that when we have to switch like Volta Protos versions.
Yep, I'll check to see and report back on Slack how many need a manual rebase. Every now and then I'll go through and I'll just hit the rebase button on things, but I haven't done that in a while. I'm not sure we actually have a solution, but at least we have visibility that we have these patch sets.
Also, knowing how many, if there's a way to report on number of patch sets that have been outstanding for more than 2 weeks or a month or something like that, that may bubble up some of those to the top.
That's actually in the report. The age of the patch set. I think it is, anyway. Yeah, the oldest patch set is 43 days. And then we have a bunch, we have at least 10 to 15, which are 12 days or older. And then half the list is 1 day or younger. So we do have that. I'll post the report to the Slack channel. And that report can be modified if people want additional columns. And people can run it themselves. All right. Any other comments on that then?
Is there any metrics that says the last time there was a comment on that patch? Because if we have a patch that's been there for like 40 days and there has not been any comment, I will argue that this patch should be abandoned.
There is not a column on that.
Because if we have a patch that is like it's actively being reviewed, but could be old, but it's actively being reviewed, and maybe it's still relevant.
All right, that's fair. I'll look to see if we can add that, and then we can at least talk about the older ones at the meeting or in Slack to see if they're still active or need to be abandoned.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Moving on. Docker and CI tools. What is the status there? I know Kent had been doing some work containerizing some of the tools. Has that been completed? Has that been integrated in the build at this point?
So just about all the work for that is done, but nothing has actually been pushed. So I've gotten a few of the tools ready, and then realized that, well, nobody was pushing for this, so I thought I might as well finish all the tools needed for currently the repos I've done this for is the Protos, Volta Go, and the Volta Go repo. I'm sure there are more that could use it, but I'm going to start with those. And so if we do others on demand or as people ask for them. And pretty much all that work is done. It just needs to be sort of committed, looked over once, and then merged into each. The only unknown is to actually commit to the new tools repo to make sure that the build actually works properly and it gets it properly pushes all the containers to Docker.
So when you say it needs to be merged into each repo, basically you mean update the make files to use the containerized tools?
Yeah. It's a relatively small change. Like it's just a make file. And I started with sort of using all of our current versions and avoiding changes where possible. So it should be pretty smooth.
So what is the time difference today if I say make Docker build, it builds everything in a Docker and container. Would that change this make target? And if so, is there a significant delta in how long it takes to build at that point from today versus using the containers?
Make Docker builds the same because it doesn't use any.
Okay.
The tools I've containerized is like, so it's, it basically has to do with when you're modifying or checking the files in the local repo. So all the formatting checks, all the linting, running the tests, making sure they run with a give and go version. The actual Docker builds are not changed because they're already in Docker containers, and I haven't touched that. It doesn't use this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any significant difference in time to run the lint using the containerized versions versus what we have today? I know you had done something about some work around, I guess, batching the files.
That was specifically with the protos. With
Okay.
the protos, because of an obscure bug or feature, depending on your point of view, each file for Golang has to go through Protalk individually. So that was specific to generating the files using Protalk, and so that slowdown is only relevant in that repo. The only other slowdown I'm seeing has to do with caching the Go dependencies. Because it's running in a container, the dependencies have to be re-downloaded every time. I tried to solve that using a mounted volume so that all the containers could share a copy of the dependencies, and that seems to work in some cases. In some cases, it doesn't help, and I'm still poking at that, but it's sort of it's a minor thing, and it shouldn't affect the build times on Jenkins, because to my understanding, Jenkins spins up a new agent each time anyways, and so it has to re-download the dependencies anyways.
So you'd mentioned you're waiting for a once-over before we start merging changes into the repos.
Yes, I'll request reviews when I'm ready for it, but it should be hopefully later today.
Okay. Okay. Later today. Any questions on the tooling? Going once.
Kent, when you make these changes, is this going to be everyone has to build everything in Docker, or is this going to be
No,
you can
it
can
be
still
done repo, it can be done repo by repo.
Okay. But once the transition is made, can someone try it or do the standard test commands without having a Docker instance available, or is it make Docker and these Docker images required?
So currently it makes the Docker images required. The Docker images, so whenever you run something, it will auto-pull them, so you don't technically have to pre-download them or anything like that. I thought, my thought was that having Docker as a requirement is better than having all of the individual tools as requirements.
Yeah,
But yes,
that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that people don't get surprised at, oh, I have to have Docker available on my system and working. But that's fine.
So one of the things I remember, it may have been David and I talked about it a few months ago, was having two of each command, a make test and a make Docker test. And then the make Docker test would just launch a container and run make test inside of it. I wonder if that's viable since you've been looking into this, Kent. I mean, that would give people an easy escape hatch to run a non-Dockerized make test if they wanted to.
it's technically viable. The problem is that you might get differences between your local tests and Jenkins. So technically it could be done that way. I see people continuing to run into the issues we have today with having different versions installed locally. So I certainly haven't built it for that. It's technically feasible, but I did not build it that way.
Yeah,
It
I
actually may
appreciate
help
it.
point it out, because if you had both, then you could really quickly say to somebody, do the Dockerized test and then do the regular test, and if there are differences, then clearly your local environment is missing something.
But you could also say if they come back and say, look, I'm having trouble, and you said, did you run a Docker, run the test which runs in the container? They said, no, we'll run that. And, well, that works. Well, then you could already assume their environment's messed up without the other one.
Yeah,
Well,
it would be good if the Dockerized tests were the default. So that would be the advanced developer escape hatch of running local copies of the tools.
Right,
I'm just worried about maintaining both targets in the make file and the cost of that versus the value. I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I would prefer if we had to pick one, we'd just go with the Docker one that we'd also use in the QA process.
Right.
This could get it really much more complicated, as you say.
Yeah, just rather than having, so the entire idea with this is to remove all the dependencies on the user's environment, right? So rather than them running stuff, and I was asking like, did you run this? Oh, you have the different version of the tools installed locally, so you can fix that. The whole idea is you don't have to worry about it at all. Just use the make targets and it will work. If you're doing development work, it doesn't matter. Like you're probably going to be able to build it in any version. The versions of Go are similar enough. Your local linter will be close enough, and using that specific version for sort of the final Jenkins builds will give you, includes the actual errors, the final version.
I think the lint commands and the SCA commands are maybe not as big a concern as make test, because a lot of developers will have a tight loop around make test, iterating through unit tests and rerunning make test a lot. And I wonder if just having some way to do that outside of containerization would be valuable.
Well, even just for so even in my IDE as an example, like running make test on the project would be really easy. I wouldn't even have to touch the make file, right? Just like for a developer loop, they can just run that one individual that one individual test with it from their editor or command line. They don't even have to go to the makefile. The makefile is mostly useful for the tests too, because the test not only does it run the test, but it generates the JUnit report and the coverage report, which aren't really that useful when you're actually developing tests. The useful.
Right.
Go ahead.
When I run make test and run the tests in the Docker container, what is the increase in time because of the Docker container versus just running make test as it is today?
So because I'm on a Mac, it's going to run it in a VM, and so it's going to be a little bit slower. But in general, the difference will be about 3 seconds. If you're developing on Linux, it's about 3 seconds, which is just the time to start the Go container for running the tests, the JUnit container for generating that report, and the Go coverage container for generating that report.
And the makefile target for test today doesn't allow me to run an individual test. It just runs the whole test suite. It's not like I can specify an extra argument to say just run this test.
That's correct.
Is there a provision in the containerized tool to say just run a single test?
So the containerized tool is basically just Go installed in a container. So if somebody wanted to run that tool with the arguments required, which is basically, the whole command to start Docker plus Go test, and then specify a file, that would work. It could be done. People could do that manually, or we could add individual unit tests for that, or makefile targets for that. But the benefit of doing that in any case besides the general run everything, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced.
So Scott, when you run a single test today, or are you talking about saying make test today, which runs a whole test suite?
Yeah, so first of all, 3 seconds is not something that worries me. I think 3 seconds is a so I often find myself, I mean, a make test is nice, but a lot of our tests output such hugely voluminous information. There's log messages and stuff being spewed out, intermixed with unit test info, a failures buried somewhere in the middle of a test run. I often end up using Go test when I'm trying to develop quickly. So maybe, my concern is not that great if I'm using Go test as a frequent development escape hatch anyway. Although if we can pass an argument to the Docker container that says, run this name test, that might be a convergence of mechanism.
Yep, it's we can look into that. I don't think I'll do it for version 1, but we can add that sort of on demand. I think the current answer is to do just escape to your local Go tests, and I think that will continue to work. I don't think how does this? I think we can look into adding something new, but I don't think we need to add something new right now because the current escape works.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments on Docker and CI tools? All right. Moving on to logging guidelines. Let me throw this link up in the chat. So this is a document I quickly put together last night, actually, on request from another meeting from Sarav. And basically, it is a document that tries to outline some guidelines for logging practices within the Volta code base. It's got a particularly bent towards Golang, but I'm sure it can be tweaked for other languages as well. It borrows some description of the log levels to start with from other documents on the web, as well as what's been posted on the wiki. And please, people, get a chance, go over this, edit it, tweak it, comment on it, and we'll modify it. So that what the different levels are for. I talk about package level support within the logging. This is where it gets in a little, excuse me, a little tied to Go as I do examples. And you can see, talks about how to set up package logging support in the packages. So that's works. It talks about using the logger as opposed to just calling the general log call, say log debug, which would do kind of the global, not package based. Talks about log message formats in terms of not using English sentences, just kind of more identifiers. It talks about using log fields, not printf type statements for logs. So any data associated with a log message should be included in a field. This helps us do anything, such things as filtering. Talks about required log data, which right now is only the device ID, assuming you have the device ID available at the point of the log message. This again allows interesting filtering capabilities, and there'll probably be other required log fields down the line if we ever add something like transaction ID. Talks about expensive log generation, where you can use the, I don't know what the V stands for. I both thought verify to make sure you're at the log is.
It's verbose.
Okay. I'm like, I don't know what V stands for, but okay. It basically allows you to check if what the log level is and conditionally execute code based on that log level, which can help if you have expensive operations that are only required for the log. In Python, when calling the logger, don't create string. Keep going, Zach.
Basically, people use the amp and
okay.
And do it, which is the wrong way, because that generates the string as opposed to just passing extra args. That's basically what I was going to say.
Okay.
I'll link to the Python docs about how to do the same thing.
Okay, yeah, you already put it here either way. Yeah, the idea is, again, no printfs, just do it as field so we can actually use it as data. I talk about logging and returning errors, which basically says if a function's returning an error, don't log the error. Let the calling function determine if that needs to be logged, because if the calling function handles the error, then all the error message does is pollute the log and actually confuse people. So if you're returning an error, don't log, then return. I mean, there are always exceptions to the rules, I'll give you that, but as a general practice.
Does this have any rules for error wrapping?
This does not talk about error wrapping at this point. That's not particularly logging.
Sure.
Do you think that needs to be included in this? Feel free to add it if you do.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. I talk a little bit about formatting in code. Again, just for consistency, not everybody has to do it. We can talk about what the best way to do it is. Just I found from my personal readability, and that's why I put it in there, but again, people can tweak this, is just, you know, how the log message is going to look. Just trying to get some code consistency. I don't expect anybody to go actually back and change existing log messages, but going forward, if there's some consistency, it wouldn't be a bad plan. Someone added related Jira items. I don't know who added that, but
that's me, and that's the discussion of the different levels.
okay.
We only the discussion of the numeric versus text levels. One of the other things at the beginning of this, you have a big list of different levels.
Yep.
Not all of these are supported by all systems. For example, the fatal or error level is, I'm not sure which one we decided to use. And then trace is not supported in some.
Yep. So, you know, in terms of fatal error, the idea is to say kind of what happens at these message levels, right? What type of things we expect to see. Actually should break up fatal and error. An uncorrectable error is fatal. So we will have error and fatal separately in the Go code. I will break that up.
So is there, I can't see down because you're not scrolled down, but is there value in having trace in this document if it's only sparsely supported in various systems? I mean, I think the harm would be that you know, people start assuming that trace is supported by all components and that trace gives you a certain verbosity. Should we try to collapse to just debug info in the ones that are common to all?
We actually did that, I think, in the discussion. I can't remember. Was that
Yeah,
in that Jira discussion?
Yeah, that's
what
in
we
that Jira
got down
item
to?
about what should be used.
Okay, I'll go through again.
And another question I had in the package logging support, where do you have guidelines on where people initialize their package level logger and where they store that logger variable? Is it just a global? Are
It's
they
package global is what it's
okay?
been.
Package global.
That seems to work fine.
Okay,
unless
good.
there's a better way.
Just to add, the trace log level, right, is not again supported in Golang as of now, right? Specifically the ZAP logger.
Yep.
But I guess there is a Jira on ZAP, right, where they have been asked to add a support for trace level. So I need to probably check if that comes through. I think we can still look at having trace in there.
Okay. So I'll go review this log level list and edit it down based on the discussion. Trace may have been left out in that discussion. If so, trace will be removed. And I'll probably kind of merge what trace and debug is to try to get it more in line with what that discussion was. And I think that discussion also covered what is actually available in the current Go log package. So there'll be, I'll tweak some of that bit stuff at the top.
Can we also make sure that whatever in this document is consistent with whatever's in those two Jira stories about using log level names instead of numbers as command line options? I think we do have someone working on implementing those log level names. I would just want to make sure that they end up implementing the names that are consistent with this document. You know, warning versus warn.
Okay.
Anything like that.
Consistent with work in Jira. All right.
Or let me know when this document is known stable and I can go and
Go
attend
edit it yourself now. It's
it.
I believe in anarchy. I mean, I believe it. Yeah, part of the reason for this document is Saurav has an intern that's going to be going through some of the code and updating the logs, messages, and we needed some sort of document that describes what we expect. So that's kind of where that's going, the purpose of this. So yeah, please edit to what's needed, and he can use it or she can use it. I don't know who it is, as they go through the code. All right, any other questions on that? That is the end of the agenda then. Anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss this morning? If not, we will end the meeting. Thank you guys for attending, and we'll see most of you on a call in 14 minutes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.